Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't.
It's like I felt like we were seeing a lot of each other, and then all of a sudden it was like I didn't see you for a while.
It was like a lull, a deep cut for sure.
Oh yeah, I didn't like it. It's good to see you. How are you?
Okay, here's a happy music thing. So
What do you got?
I just want to say I'm very excited for this guest.
Me
I'm excited
too.
I'm very excited for all of the guests, and they're all unique in their own way, but I want to find out how you know him and all about
Well,
him.
I know him personally because he was my composition teacher at Rutgers when I was working on my PhD there.
Maybe that's why I know his name.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
So we're going, okay. So that's now I understand.
And I always, in like my bios and programs, I always mention that I studied with Tarik because I feel so fortunate. I feel so lucky for that.
You should, bro.
I want the world to know.
After reading about him, I'm like, man, all these guests we have, I'm like, well, now I want to do this just so I could talk to this person.
Yeah. And a similar kind of cool story where it's like he had this whole other career in the financial sector and then just decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be a composer. And then just has had an incredible career, including major opera productions.
Ballet.
He was one of the few British composers to be asked to write something for King Charles's coronation.
I saw that, and I have literally a million questions about it. So I love royal shit. Sorry.
Are you? Yeah, you like that stuff?
Yeah, sure. Marty, I really like it all, to be honest.
I want to get some candid opinions from him that maybe he'll ask to cut out about monarchies in the 21st century.
We can cut it out. It's fine. But I just need to, I want to know, like, did he touch him? Did he shake his hand? Like,
if I had to stand in front of people and address another human being as Your Highness, I think I would have to say, you know what, I'm okay. I'll watch from home, thank you.
I'll just remove myself.
I don't know that I could do that.
Well,
and that's not disrespecting the history and the institution. It's just the idea of royalty I find a little.
Oh shit, he's a Fulbright scholar. God,
Fulbright scholar.
I gotta instantly become smart right now.
He's an Oxford boy.
Okay.
Proper. God, I feel like I should have worn French cuffs for this.
I'm wearing summer clothing.
Suddenly I feel way too
I know, I feel like I should have worn like a
proletariat.
A proper sweater with little like gem buttons, something a little furry.
He's gonna be in a white button-down shirt.
No, he's not.
He is. I'm gonna call it. Here he is. One of my favorite people in Galaxy Milky Way.
Oh.
Hello.
Yes. Tarik.
Oh my God, Marty, you called it.
What did he say? What was he going to say?
His white shirt. Hi, Tarik.
I said you were going to be in a classy white button-down shirt.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible,
right,
Marty. Good work.
Are you Jackie or Jacqueline?
Well, it says Jacqueline, but please call me Jackie because my Nana calls me Jacqueline. She's the only one.
Right. We could go that way.
Yeah, sure. Whichever way you want. Very nice to meet you.
You too. Hey, Marty,
if you're feeling like you want to say Jacqueline, like maybe it'll sound better with your accent.
Well, I see it says Marticles.
Marty keeps changing his damn name.
I've been waiting for you to notice.
I've noticed. Marty
it's pronounced Marticles.
Marticles. Oh, Marticles. That sounds a bit like testicles. Like, oh, wow. Is that what you're going for?
This is going to be a really fun episode.
I hope so. This is great, you guys. This is fantastic. I saw
This is
the
awesome.
remit of what you're trying to do. I think it makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
it's a big experiment. It's a big
Excellent.
experiment. Yeah.
Well, and so yeah, cool.
Journey.
Happy to go whenever you or whatever you want to do. I'm just gonna drink coffee.
Yeah. Well, we're already
As you
recording
should.
and you'll be able to edit anything
All the
out that you
all
want.
the
So feel free to, we can
four-letter
speak very
words.
candidly today, and then after the fact,
Yeah,
if you think, oh, I kind of don't want that out there, then
yeah,
we cut it out. Because Jackie and I do plenty of that as well. We
yeah.
cut out some of our
Sometimes we just have to.
So we're not gonna do like top 10 shit composers.
We
Can
can
we
fucking
though?
do that.
No,
We can do that.
Front page
no,
of
we
Slip
can't.
Disc tomorrow. Tarik
Yeah.
O'Regan trashes.
Swags off everyone.
I'm just wondering, I guess, to start. Well, that was a great start.
Yeah,
I feel like there
I
was so
figured we're
much
going.
information. Yeah, we're just going.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm
Yeah.
curious to know where your love of composition began. I mean, when did you first discover that this is something you wanted to do?
I remember it quite vividly. I'd started off life as a percussionist musically pretty late. Okay, so the other, I mean, I came to music,
Fun.
Ding ding bam bam.
yeah, that's right. I came to music
It's
very
often one of
late.
my favorite. It's often one of my favorite places to be in the band room. To be honest with you, is behind the timpani,
Mhm.
Obviously,
teaching some seventh grader how to fucking just wail on that thing.
whack it. Well, I was I was a percussionist and late. You know, I was probably let me think, probably like I probably didn't really read music till I was 11 or 12, and then I was playing in bands, playing drums in bands, and then more stuff at school. And then I got quite good at percussion. So I started going to the Royal College of Music Junior Department, which is their Saturday school.
Oh yes.
Wow.
From, let me think, I must have been 1992, so I was 14. And I remember vividly, there are not many moments in your life where you're like, I really remember this moment. It was the first rehearsal of the symphony orchestra, and traditionally you'd work your way up to the symphony orchestra was the premier performing group at the Royal College of Music. And you're talking about people who are all between about 11 and 17.
Wow.
And so normally you wouldn't get to play in this thing, but they were opening with a performance of Schnittke's first violin concerto,
Wow.
which has this incredible percussion section in it. So they basically needed everyone who was a percussionist. So on my first day at the Royal College of Music Junior Department, I turn up to this rehearsal, and it's the Schnittke violin concerto. And
That's such a right time, right place.
And they put me on timpani.
Wow.
And I'm like, whatever. I'm used to like, you know, Mozart, where it's like, boom, okay, I'll be back in 20 minutes. Boom. Okay, peace. You know, it's like they start. First thing I notice is if you listen to the Schnittke first violin concerto, there is a cadenza for violin and timpani.
Oh my God. It's literally like the most important one possibly back there.
So like, you know where the timpani are, they're like miles away, and the soloist is like down there, like
of course.
trying to cue this stuff. Anyway, the orchestra starts playing, and it is by far the best ensemble that I'd ever played in. You know,
Wow.
It all just sounded amazing. And in that second, it was just like infinite magic. Just suddenly I was in the middle of endless permutations of sound. And within about a minute of being in that, I was like, I want to do that. I want to make this feeling that I'm having.
Yeah.
I want to do that. And I didn't know how. Because I'm just like, but I was like, this is what I want to do. And it was so immediate. And other people have said things like, I want to be the conductor. I want to be the person that's like bringing it all together.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I want to be the magician. I want to like cast this spell.
Yep.
And then it was like, how do I go about doing this? Because I've got no idea. I've got no idea what to do. And so what I started paying a lot of attention in rehearsals because, and actually percussion is quite good because yeah, when I wasn't doing that, you are in a lot of the pieces where you're sitting pretty quietly,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just these great orchestral rehearsals are some of the best composition lessons I ever had
I bet.
because you're just watching the stuff being put together in real time. It reminds me of the Leonard Bernstein stuff when that footage he was doing with the New York Times all those 60 years ago.
Yeah.
What makes it so amazing is he's showing you how the piece is put together in sections, and it's so educational. So I learned a lot in these rehearsals. I was like, oh, that's how, because the conductor will be like, okay, let's just work out that section with the horns and violas. And like, oh, that's nice. It's sort of you're very when you're young and hungry, you're very magpie.
Yes.
And that's fine. I always think that's totally fine. Just absorb, copy, do as much as you can. Just start working it out. So that is when I realized I wanted to be a composer, and then started really learning. And then I went back to my school, and I was like, how do I study composition? And we had a really good music department in the high school.
Yeah.
And they kind of got me to a great composition teacher, a guy called Jeremy Dale Roberts, who's passed away, must be about 5-6 years ago. And he was just really good because he could tell that I didn't really know what I was doing. And was just so good at like, you've got to like get your repertoire knowledge up. Because I guarantee you anything you're thinking of right now has been done, and you need to see how it's been done really well.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, and you shouldn't feel disheartened, but like you just need to read through stuff with scores and go to as many live concerts as you can. So it was a very rich time. I remember this period up until I went to university.
Was that the first thing? That was his first step, is to listen to music, to different music,
Definitely.
to discover
Yeah,
composers.
I mean, you have to discover where your own tastes lie. What you like.
That makes sense for some reason.
Might not actually be the case once you discover more.
Yeah, for some reason, maybe this is because I'm an instrumentalist. I thought he would say, "Okay, we're going to learn how to play piano," or something like that. Guitar. I don't know, something.
The Royal College of Music made me learn piano because I couldn't play the piano and that I don't know what the history of that is. I suppose it's a legacy of keyboard skills are useful. I don't really know what I think about that, but no, it was very much, you've opened this door into this world that you didn't know existed.
Right. So you have to know the world that you're about to step into.
It's way bigger than you think. It's way bigger than you think. And so I used to take the train up to Victoria Station in London. There was the library, Westminster Library was there, which had one of the great music back. I hope it's still like that. But this, back then, this was a public library that for whatever reason had thousands and thousands of scores in it. So I would just go and get a recording and a score, and I would do that meticulously. And I learned so much following scores. It's just like, I remember feelings like, oh, so much of this is like someone showing me tricks, like magic tricks, juggling tricks. Like so much of composition is games and learning the little things you can do behind the scenes to make it appear seamless and magical and naturally flowing, whatever your musical choice is. But you can look across massively diverse composers who are writing in massively different styles, and you can see these same tricks being played. And it's very, very, in my mind, it's very much being brought into sort of when you start looking at a lot of scores and listening, it's like being brought into some sort of secret society.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Wow, I'm
and
never
that's what I mean
heard it
with my,
described that
yeah.
way.
Well, I remember with, I mean, a lot of our work, Marty, was just like, let's listen to this, let's look at
Yeah,
that, let's listen
that's
to
right. I
that.
remember
Do you
you
know
would
this?
show me, I would be showing you something, and then you would say, "Oh, let's go find," because our room was it was in this little room in the library, and you would be like, "Oh, let's go and
Yeah.
check out this score because I want you to see that." And then that's exactly right. We would open it up, we would look at it, dissect it, listen to it.
Yeah, and so
Hugely helpful.
exactly. And I think like composition is totally enmeshed in my mind, enmeshed in performance and
Hmm.
improvisation and listening and score
Yeah.
reading and all that stuff. And I think it's good that things have sort of have progressed back in that way. I think,
Mhm.
I think composing was sort of split off in the 19th century from other aspects of music making into its own higher realm.
Mm.
And I don't necessarily think in the long term that was the best thing for for it was great during the 19th century, it's great during the early 20th century. And then as you progress further into the late 20th century, it's like it's got so disconnected from practical music making.
Mm.
And I think there has been a shift back. It's like there's nothing wrong with viewing composing as a craft.
Of
You're
course,
not
it
you're
is.
not a
Yeah.
genius
Right.
sitting up here disconnected from the people playing it.
Yeah.
And I was just lucky that that first spark came from playing. And it was so interesting because I knew that I didn't want to be a performer. It wasn't like, oh, I love this so much, I want to become a world famous percussionist.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like I love playing percussion, but it was so clear. It's like that's not what I want to do. I want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Same with me in piano.
Did you went to the Royal College of Music Saturday program, you said?
Yep, that's right.
And
Yeah.
then that took you eventually you studied higher education in the States.
Well, so what happened? Yeah, um, so I did all my university work in the UK.
Oh,
Um,
university work in the UK. Okay.
and one thing that may not be obvious to an American listenership, American musicians or anyone, is that in the UK, you don't you don't apply to a university and then declare a major 2 years down the line. You apply to a program
Right.
to study that program
Right.
from day one. So you're applying to study English literature or biology or whatever it is, which means in order to do that, you have had to have sat uh, what we call A levels, which are our sort of terminal tests
Mm.
at high school level. And one of those subjects has to be one of your A levels. So
Mm.
you're already thinking about what you want to do at university. The A levels are a 2-year program, which means you need to pick them in 3 years prior to that. So if you're
Wow.
starting university at 18, by 15, you need to kind of know what you want to be doing at university. So it's very early.
Oh,
So this all happened very quickly for me. I was like, I want to be a composer. I suddenly started thinking, oh, that means I need to do music A level. Music A level had a composition component in it. It had a history, theory.
Yeah.
And then there was a huge decision, which I mean, it's a big decision that I think a lot of people make. It's probably more of a bigger deal in the UK, but do I study at a conservatoire for my undergrad? Or do I go to a university,
Mm.
which in the UK are two separate things. You don't really have things like Yale or Rice or
Like a
Indiana
liberal
or
arts where even if you major music, you're still taking
yeah.
math and English classes.
Well, and also places like Rutgers or whatever, yeah, that has a music conservatoire within the university itself.
Right.
That
Right.
I
that
see.
doesn't really exist. So I was trying to choose between the Royal College of Music
Yeah.
and Oxford, and I ended up picking Oxford, which is it's kind of an interest. I had a great time. I loved it there. And part of it, I think, was it was also new to me. I kind of was slightly like, this is all moving so fast. If I go to the Royal College of Music, am I sure that this is, it's going to work out? Am I sure am I going to do this for the rest of my life? And I've always been like interested in other things like literature or whatever. And so I went to Pembroke College, Oxford, which was a tiny college. I think there must have been only 300, 400 people in there. There were only 2 people studying music a year. So I was one
Wow.
of them with my what's called your tutorial partner. So it's this guy Will, who's a great friend of mine, and we went through the degree together. But 2 things, pro and con. So like undoubtedly, I would have had significantly more and better performances of my work at the Royal College of Music, undoubtedly, because of the level of performer that is
Makes
there.
sense. Makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
That's
And
another level.
yeah, and I can't tell you how important that is to any composer, is good performances of your work earlier on.
Yes.
I would imagine, yeah.
Well, it's a really weird way that our world works, which is the more you, it's like you, for some reason, the way the composition world works is, when you're starting off, you get the shit performers, and then
Yeah.
like, as you get better, and like, now, and then finally you get the Berlin fill, right? When you don't need it because you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You need the Berlin fill when you're like not entirely sure what you're doing,
Yeah.
because they're going to play it correctly, and you can
Of course.
anything that sucks, is your
Is
fault.
on you. That's right. That's right.
And so,
Tough.
yeah, undoubtedly, I would have had better performance. So I went to Oxford, which didn't have a professional orchestra. That the orchestras are made up of people studying physics and all these other subjects. It was really good on history, really good, had really good um, education and counterpoint, and I loved all that stuff. But instrumental performances, I remember hearing a string quartet that I'd written performed by some friends of mine, and I was like sticking forks in my face. I was like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is
I think
Yikes.
every young composer,
what is
college
this?
composer has that experience, and
What? Yeah, it's also like, what have I done with my life? Why does this? What happened to that magic? Like, it's
Mm,
all gone down the drain. Um, and then I see. This shows you how little I knew. I then discovered, not having been brought up in this world, all these choirs.
yeah,
So Oxford and Cambridge have, some of the best choirs in the world in these tiny little colleges, because they're part of the foundation of these colleges that were basically founded hundreds and hundreds of years ago to train. They're sort of
right.
like educational monasteries, really.
yeah,
So part of it, there'd be this choir. So suddenly, you're like, oh my God, these are amazing. And um, they were very hungry for new music, funnily enough, because these choirs at the choral foundation. So in Cambridge, that would be King's College, Cambridge,
yeah,
St John's
Okay.
College, Cambridge. Those are the boys' choirs, and then you've got the mixed voice choirs like Trinity and Gomble and Keys, and in Oxford, the big ones are Christ Church, New College, Magdalen.
mm,
They're performing uh, services every day, every single day. They are performing evensong, which is in that Anglican tradition is sort of a 30 or 40-minute service,
mm,
80% of which is music.
yeah,
And um, there's always a room in what's called the anthem. There's always a room for a new piece of music,
yeah,
could be or anything
yeah,
that could fit in. And what I was amazed was, A, I started realizing there were these amazing performers around. B, they would rehearse daily for fewer minutes than the service, right? So the service is 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
They'd rehearse for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was just in their system. They're doing this. And the interesting thing about it was the altos, tenors, and basses were older boys and men, and then the trebles were kids from the school, the local.
Yeah.
Each of these college foundations have a school.
Interesting.
These young kids, so they're all like, about, I don't know, 8 to 11 or something like that. These kids, they didn't care if they're performing Tallis or Harrison Birtwistle. It was just notes on a page, right? They're just
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, finish this piece, gonna sing the next piece.
Just
It was
eat
all
music.
yeah, it's all like the guys, the old guys on in the back row singing bass. They're like, oh, what's this terrible modern crap by O'Regan?
Yeah.
So so I started writing music. That's why I started writing music for voice, simply to get to better performances, that I could become a better composer. It wasn't I was particularly drawn to that genre or to that
Well,
area.
that's so interesting that it was just so very
That's
utilitarian for you.
very utilitarian. It was like,
Yeah.
It's nice.
how do I get these performances? And to their credit, considering it's, you're talking about chapels and churches and cathedrals and thinking very historically, maybe a little conservatively. These people, it's a bit like the band world. These people, new music is just a part of daily life. Like there's just tons and tons of new music being done. So I was spoiled. Like I could write anything for any of these choirs, and they're like, yeah, we'll give it a go. And they just shove it into the service.
Wow.
And it's like, it's done.
Awesome.
Did it work? Didn't it work? There was no preciousness about it.
And that also now explains to me why so much of your early choral stuff is sacred. I never made that connection with you before.
There you go. Yeah.
All those early
and
pieces that I love. And yeah.
By the end of the service, they're already thinking about the next day.
Yeah.
So there's
They
no
forgot
time.
about you.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
no time for it. I remember there was one of the music directors, and he was just going, well, it's like when we do a new piece, a bit like opening a bottle of wine that's been sort of lying around. It's either going to be forgotten really quickly, or maybe it'll just be savored, we'll remember it. But it's just like we're on to the next bottle.
Yeah.
And it's very utilitarian, very practical, very logistically oriented. That's how I got into writing. It's how I learned to write quickly. How I learned to write, how I learned to keep scores tidy. Because if you've only got 20 minutes to rehearse, you cannot have anybody at any point saying, this measure doesn't make sense. Like, is this right? Or this is a wrong note. Because you've wasted 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And you've only got 40 more lots of 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All the minutes are precious in a rehearsal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I personally,
second.
I always felt really lucky that I had that really, really early conducting and rehearsal and running rehearsal experience, like even starting in high school, because then when I started writing, choral and orchestral music, I sort of came at it immediately from that understanding of what it's going to be like to actually teach this and rehearse it. And I always found it so hard to kind of toe that line of writing something really interesting and something that feels sophisticated to me, and making sure that this is something that, a group that's realistically going to perform it is going to be able to readily rehearse it and do it well.
Yep.
And there's absolutely zero way to learn that outside of having a group do your music.
Absolutely.
So I think that first thing about starting that composition career is finding ways to do that. So yeah, I mean, you were so smart to do that in terms of the choir and finding that.
I mean that really is an example of like luck, and it's where not knowing exactly what you're doing gives you tremendous confidence.
Yeah.
If I'd grown up as a chorister, I think I'd be shitting myself.
Yep.
If one of these world famous choirs were like, hey, will you write a piece? I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I had no idea who these people were. I was like, yeah, you want to do it? Yeah. I said, well, yeah, let's do it. And then slowly people will be like, oh, you're piece was done by New College, Oxford. You know, they're very, very famous. I was like, no.
You're like, what do you mean? I have no idea.
What? But to both your point, it's again, it's putting composition back into the practical world and
Yeah.
not separating it.
Yeah.
And it is totally embedded in some act of performance.
Sure.
As a, conductor, performer, as I say, improviser, any of these things is fully, composition is fully enmeshed in that.
Yeah. So what did that transition look like from sort of cutting your teeth with these early ensembles and figuring it out? What was the point that you felt you made that sort of transition into being more of a professional, or what was there a particular piece or a particular performance experience that made you feel like you crossed some sort of threshold?
So yeah, so back then it was really interesting, and it's I often feel a couple of things when, like, the period that I studied in the UK, I would say was at the end of a golden age.
Mm,
And so I often feel very hypocritical when people ask me for advice, because
mm,
simply practically that world doesn't exist anymore.
right.
Starting with this, my entire education all the way to the end of grad school was free. It's paid for by the
No,
taxpayer, paid for by
yeah.
the government. I was given a grant because my parents didn't earn very much money. So I was given an additional grant to drink alcohol. No, to buy,
Where do I apply for that one?
Wait, yeah. Where is this? Where do we
to
go
buy.
for this one?
In my case, it was the London Borough of Croydon.
Mm,
So yeah, you were given a grant, if which was means tested. So if your education was paid for, and
Wow.
then if you needed extra money for, like, books, food, accommodation, stuff like that, you'd get this grant. Firstly, that, and then secondly, the role of the BBC, which is very
oh,
rare. So the BBC is not just a broadcaster, as PBS might be, or NBC or whatever, but
mhm,
they're also a commissioner of work,
right.
and they've got the orchestras to perform it.
Hmm.
The
So this,
proms, if you will.
yeah, but yeah, not just the proms, but you've got 5 symphony orchestras
That's true.
doing concerts all throughout the year, paid for by, in effect, the taxpayer.
Wow.
So that, back then, and the BBC back then was very, very well funded. Now that's also something that's changed. Successive governments have basically restricted the funding of the BBC, which is through something called the license fee. The license
Mm.
fee is in effect a tax, and the license fee is set by the government, and the government has been sort of not allowing it to get any higher. And the
Okay.
BBC makes
Mhm.
all of its money through that because it's not allowed to advertise. There's no advertising.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't realize that.
Really?
yeah. And so you sort of finish university debt free, and
Right.
then there's this whole organization that's kind of looking for stuff to put on the air. This, if you think about, like, Toscanini and the NBC rate, it's that era.
Yeah.
When you think about, you have to go back quite a long way in the States,
Mm.
where, and you think about all the golden age of commissioning that was being done, um, of American music. It was like that, but in the sort of 90s and early 2000s. And
Okay.
so what I remember is, every year there was something called SPNM, which doesn't exist anymore. See, another thing that has morphed into something else, a very good organization called Sound and Music now, but which is a much broader. It's a bit like New Music USA. It's a bit support organization for new. But
Hmm.
SPNM stood for the Society for the Promotion of New Music. It was founded by William Walton,
Oh, yeah.
back in the 20s. And every year, or twice a year, you'd send in your piece, and a panel would look at it. And basically it was like, if they liked your piece, it would be done by a BBC orchestra. And that meant that it was going to be performed, it was going to be recorded, it was going to be
Awesome.
broadcast.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
So you get all of this stuff. And I remember a very early piece was done by the BBC Symphony Orchestra. It was
Was
called The
that Leighton
Pure.
Manifest?
That was done later for the Proms. This was a piece called The
Oh,
Pure Good of Theory, which was
oh,
a
Pure
sort of
Good of Theory. Yes, I love that one.
violin concerto thing.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it was suddenly you're suddenly there at Maida Vale Studio, which is, as in terms of people that have been work that been done there across all genres, is as famous as Abbey Road.
Wow.
It's the BBC's main live studio. There's a bunch of great uh, and famous performing halls in there and studios in there. So yeah, at that point I was doing my graduate work in Cambridge University with Robin Holloway, again free.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
these opportunities started coming up with the BBC, and then they, coupled with that, there were a lot of. This was also the golden age of CD recordings. CDs have gone in effect. I don't know if like Naxos. That was when
Yeah.
Naxos was churning out, 100
Right.
releases a month.
Yep.
I mean, it's thousands a year from
I
one
use
label.
Naxos a lot.
Yeah, and these things would come out, and I knew that because I had a sideline job as a reviewer for the Observer newspaper, which is the Guardian.
Yeah.
The Observer
Oh,
is the
cool.
Guardian on Sunday. So I was reviewing each week. I was reviewing CDs, and so what would happen is the record label would send you a month before, like, which of these CDs you want, and I would every month would get about 500 CDs. I mean, I'm not joking. That is the level of output that was happening back then.
That's insane. That's a golden era, though, I would say, of music being
Absolutely.
released.
And so so I finished my undergrad in 99, was doing grad work 99, 2000, 2001. And yeah, that's what was going on. And there was the final part of the hypocritical advice is in the UK back then, there was a very clear track to becoming, and this is a track that Thomas Adès, Judith Weir, Julian Anderson, a lot of these British composers, Oliver Nusson, George Benjamin. This is a track that had even back to Benjamin Britten. This is a track that had been worn by many people.
Wow.
You do your degree, you get kind of connected with the BBC, who are always looking for stuff to put on air. That leads you to good performances. Then through that, you start getting recordings, whether it's recordings off air or commercial recordings that start being put out into the world.
Yeah.
And two things happen. So that's in answer to like that. When did I first realize I could, be a professional? Was sitting there in the Maida Vale with the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and Martin Brabbins, a great conductor, who's just formerly of English National Opera. And you just think, oh my God, I've got access to the best players in the UK.
Yeah.
Best, in the best recording studio, and I haven't paid a penny. I haven't done, look, I didn't even know that back then. Talking to you
didn't
now,
know how lucky you are. Yeah.
Even talking to you now, I'm thinking of more and more things. I was like, yeah, that was free. That was free. Didn't do that. So that also explains why I look to get out, because too much of a good thing, you realize there's a lot on offer if you stay on track.
Yeah.
If you get off the track, it all disappears. I'm making it sound more Machiavellian than it is, but there was certainly a sense of, this is the type of music you should be writing.
Right. And certainly for you, your sort of ethnic and familial backgrounds had a profound effect on your personal style of composition, and one of the things that made it kind of unique. I would say probably coupled with this lack of sort of formal compositional training in terms of just theory and application of tonal harmony into modern works. But maybe you can talk about that a little bit in terms of how you were approaching your own compositions just from this much more sort of broad palette of sound. that
I
you were
mean,
exposed to early on.
I mean, absolutely. And it's nothing, it was back then, it was nothing particularly conscious. It's become more
Sure.
conscious as I've gone on. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I was, my whole family in North Africa, listens to a broad and different range of music that I was
Yeah.
used to listening to. And I remember long car journeys with a tape of local musicians from Morocco and Algeria, and it was just very much in my mind.
Hmm.
There'd be Madonna, and then I mean, it was just a lot of music
Yeah.
Can you
and it never.
describe the sound of that, the North African, Moroccan, Algerian music? Was it pop? Was it
So there was always a version of it that's kind of like what I would call Europop,
Hmm.
um, that um, you kind of uh, hear all over the world in any culture. So kind of synth based, fall to the floor, very like poppy, Madonna in different languages type of thing.
Yeah.
Very 80s, a lot of that stuff. But then the interesting thing is what are, I would say, instruments particular to regional areas. So, but
Right.
the oud, which is the Arabic lute.
love the oud?
Hmm.
Great
Right. And
instrument.
so the difference between the lute in Western societies, it is a historical instrument.
Yeah.
And so if you use the oud, if you use the lute as a composer, you're making some kind of historical reference. You can't stop people hearing that instrument other than in a historical way. It's an instrument of the Renaissance. Um, But the oud never went out of fashion, so it's both. It's a historical traditional instrument, but it's also used today.
Yeah,
It's been
oud is
continuously.
popping for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so, it's
Oud
just
is
like,
lit.
yeah, there's just like that music, that sound world was just there all the time. And it didn't occur to me that it's the other or something else.
Hmm.
And so it just naturally started working its way into my music
Yeah.
rhythmically,
Right.
texturally, and it was just there. And then just as I grew older, I was like, I realized, oh yeah, you're just a lot of what you're writing is trying to remember this stuff, and
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
not ethnographic, like it's not I'm not that interested in authenticity or accuracy, but it's just like
It's a feel and
right.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I it was
that you
just this
imbue
sort
into
of
it.
yeah. And it was one of those things where you realize that music, both of my parents were not what I would call outwardly musical. Like not, they didn't study music or anything,
Yeah.
but music was such a huge part of their life, and therefore it was a huge part of mine. So
Right.
as I got, as I began to educate myself and understand and be taught more about music, I realized actually music's been a part of my life is, all the way through. It's just I
Sure.
wasn't really,
Aware of it.
it's like there's probably, I don't know, how many people have perfect pitch you have no idea because
Yeah, that's right.
never been tested, right?
That's
So
right.
it's like
Never even thought about that.
Yeah.
you suddenly start realizing it's like, oh, there's all this stuff.
Yeah.
And as I'm writing music later than I'm thinking about music of my, of the 80s really. So when I'm up to about 12, 13, then 10 years later, I'm writing this stuff. That's I think what's in my head and what I'm writing is sort of channeling all this stuff that I'd been listening to. And it was only
Yeah.
even later than that I actually realized what I was doing and
Hmm.
started writing music specifically using titles of um, North African genres such as Rai or Chabi music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Rai and
Oh,
Chabi
It's one of those
are
things where
two string works of yours that folks listening should
Chabi's for
absolutely
strings.
go
Yeah,
and
yeah,
find. Because I think
yeah,
it's just such a perfect example. If you think about what like Brahms and Dvorak were doing in terms of imbuing
right.
some of those ethnic melodies, but they were just taking the melodies and sort of the feel of it, but putting it just straight into the language that they were that 19th
Yeah,
century language that they were actually
bar
living
talk
in.
as well.
Bartok
Big
for
bar
sure.
talk
yeah,
for
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like you on the other side of that, you're really kind of changing the actual language itself to accommodate that feel a little bit more.
Yeah, trying to. I mean, it was very a lot of things, you can do a lot of things and then after the fact take credit for it and go, oh, that's exactly what I was doing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Actually, it's so good of you, Martin, to have picked up on my genius approach to. But there's a lot of stuff that you just do intuitively that you're
Yeah.
not even thinking about.
Right, right.
And
And
then it might even take someone else to look at your score and say, hey, have you
tell you,
noticed
yeah.
that you're doing this stuff? You're like, oh yeah. And so, yeah, it definitely is something that I've become more aware of. And then there are things that I've been very consciously aware of, which is, I started doing a lot of work with obviously O'Regan and Irish heritage on my dad's side. Started doing a lot of work with Paul Hillier, who was Chamber
Mhm.
Choir Ireland. And when I was there, I'd go and look up various relatives and where they lived. And
Yeah,
suddenly, that part of me, I was sort of got more and more interested in looking at that part of my background. And that was a very conscious thing because
gotcha.
that's quite different to the Arab side, which I think was more
More of
intuitive.
your
This was
childhood.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
like me discovering parts of Ireland and ancestors who did various
That's
things and sort
cool.
of,
Right.
yeah. And so I just became interested in that because I think you don't really write, I don't think anyone writes music in a vacuum, right? You're always going to
Sure.
be
Hopefully not.
influenced, but yeah, because you die.
Science joke.
That was a good
Sorry.
one. Very good.
You're welcome.
Very good.
Uh,
But that's true. I mean, the thing that every composer is going to struggle with, regardless of at what point in your life you start, is finding what your voice is, what your sort of
yeah,
sonic identity is as a composer. And you kind of, I don't know that you can really get around starting that journey without just copying a lot of what other people are doing and then kind of
yeah,
eventually creating this
Yeah,
absolutely.
mishmash. And one of
has to
my
evolve over
favorite
time.
stories that was so impactful for me when I was young and at one of these sort of composer institutes, and I was maybe like 20 or something. And we were all, and it was one of those things where a group was performing the pieces that the composers were writing. And this one composer went, and and one of the panelists after the group performed it said, "You have written a really, really beautiful piece by Mendelssohn." And
That is so
that
fucked.
one line hit me like a ton of bricks and changed my life because as I was listening to the piece, I was like, oh, this is really beautiful. And then he said that and he was like, oh yeah, I thought it was beautiful because it sounded like Mendelssohn.
Well, yeah, because there's a joke along those lines about a student who's
That's
coming
so
up to
funny.
a deadline to hand in a symphonic piece, and he's like later, and the student's like, I just can't do it, and the teacher's like, you've got the deadline's coming out, you've got to send this piece, and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and the teacher says, look, could do. If you get really stuck, it's like 24 hours before he's got to hand in his piece. Because just go and take a piece of music out of the library and just write it out backwards, right? Just write it out backwards and
And see
and
what you
send
got.
it in. And so the student does, and then the grades come back and it's like fail. And the teacher's like, what happened? Did you not get it in? And he says, yeah, no, I did. He said, well, what did you do? He said, I took your advice. I went to the library and I wrote out the piece backwards like you told me to do. And I sent it in. It's come back and I've got a fail. And the teacher says, well, what did you do? He goes, well, actually, I took one of your pieces. I wrote it out backwards and it came out as Beethoven's Fifth.
Oh, whoops.
Ooh, fresh. That's a fresh one.
Yeah.
That's a
But
live one
yes,
there.
But
no,
it's
I
like,
mean, yeah,
I think that's
you're right.
something that you have to grapple with and you just have to write a lot. You have to first write in emulation of the people whom you admire.
Yes.
And,
And
there was certainly a period in my life when I was studying with you and learning your pieces. And I can certainly point to pieces in my repertoire where it's like, I'm trying to sound like Tarik here.
Do you feel like you have reached a point where you get the sound you want from your own music? Was there a point in time where you thought, not necessarily, oh, I made it in terms of fame or fortune or notoriety or anything like that, but for you personally, has there been a point yet where you said, this is my Mount Everest, I've climbed it?
I mean, no. No,
I was expecting that answer, by the way, so but I actually didn't know. Wasn't sure what you would say.
To this day, I'm always and I think this links into what we were just talking about. I'm always surprised at a live performance of my work.
That's beautiful, though.
I'm always 95 these days. I'm very lucky and I get amazing performances. I'm always 95% pleasantly surprised. And 100% of that 95% is in the performers, who are phenomenal. There's always 5% of me that is like, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. And that 100% of that 5% is me. And I think a lot of this has to do with, and various people have said a version of this, a lot of this has to do with taste. And I think this links into what we were just talking about, is when you're starting off, I can't really imagine a world where, when you're starting off or not, where you sit back and go, well, that was just fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, I have not experienced that also yet. So I don't know if I ever will.
Because if you did, I think you probably lack taste. And taste is that gap between kind of what in your mind is the perfect thing.
Right.
And like,
and what you're actually producing.
Yes. Yeah. And so that gap does shrink over time. But at the beginning, when you're starting off, the feeling you definitely want, unless you're an android, is, oh, why can't I get what I want? Why can't why can't I quite get this? Either it's a practical thing. It's like, oh, that just doesn't sound right. Or it's like, oh shit, this I'm hearing it now and it just sounds like this other composer. You want that feeling because that means you're A, human, and B, you have taste.
Yeah. I think it's part of the love and hate and the push and pull and all of that.
If you don't have any sense of taste or vision or whatever, then at 15 you're going to hear your first piece of music that sounds like Mendelssohn and go, well, I guess I'm Mendelssohn.
Just call me Felix. No.
Job done. I mean, don't forget that a lot of these quote unquote negative feelings are actually the right ones to have. And there's a reason your mind and body behaves that way, which is you're trying to better yourself. And you want that feeling, because otherwise you've kind of given up, I think, if you just.
So is this like the third or fourth person saying that failure is
wonderful?
I mean, failure.
It's not even failure. It's just
it's not failure. I'm saying failure because I think that, and like we always say, Marty, this podcast, we're gearing it towards young people, confused people who aren't sure if they want to pursue this. Yeah. I think it's just so important to go back to the fact that this is, and I say this every day to my 12-year-olds, that this is not linear. You choose to do an art form. It is gray as the world is. I mean, I can get on a soapbox about that later.
And you only see the upward trajectory when you're able to step far enough back.
But even when you're up, it's just like craps, you guys. Yeah. Even when you're up, you can very quickly lose that 300 you just made.
Yeah. Like, your 12-year-olds play craps.
No, I play craps, Tarik.
That's very impressive.
I play craps, yeah.
Hey, kids. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think the other thing is, the other thing is not to gloss over failure sucking. I mean, it's when things go wrong, it is horrible.
Yeah.
Like and like, I
I think
don't
it's the
actually
price of
believe
admission.
anyone. Yeah, I don't really believe people that say, for example, "Oh, I don't read reviews of my work." I don't actually believe you. And yeah, negative. If, for example, bad reviews are horrible, especially in Europe and the UK where they sort of go for the jugular. But I mean, yes, and what you're saying about the randomness of I guess fashion,
Mm. Yeah.
that is out of your control.
Right.
Like
Right.
every single composer I know, including the absolute A-list names, have gone through periods of near obscurity.
Mm-hmm.
Not at the beginning of their career, in the middle,
It's somewhere right.
where
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're not getting the commissions for whatever reason. The name isn't carrying any cultural weight, and then suddenly it changes and they're up again, and it's not up to them.
Right.
So you have to, with all of the sort of advice about getting your ducks in a row, one big piece of advice is, just be aware a lot of it is not in your control.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a linear career path, as you say.
Right.
This is not oh, I'm going to go up for promotion in 2 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You can do things to mitigate against it, and it's a bit like not putting all your savings in one stock.
Mm-hmm.
So you can write different types of music, because the thing about the music world is that the fashion doesn't go up and down like that. It sort of does this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can be quite well regarded in, let's say, the opera world, or the ballet world, or
Yeah.
the choral world,
Yeah.
or the symphonic world, or media. And those worlds, for whatever reason, I do not understand it. They don't talk to each other. So
Yeah. That's right.
you could be a big name in the choral world, and like there is no or instrumental performances of your work.
Yeah.
Or you can be like the person that's writing all the operas, and there's no instrumental performances of work. Or you get loads of symphonic performances, and that's it. No one's interested in your stage works.
Mm.
And so practically you can mitigate against fashion, because fashion, as I said, doesn't move in lockstep.
Mm-hmm.
It moves by genre.
Right.
So
Right.
yes, do not write only choral pieces or only instrumental pieces, or
Sure.
that
Sure.
that will, as a piece, just pure practical advice. And this is just statistics. Like, you're going to be better off while a little bit of your catalog is like sleeping over here, this other bit's working. And
Yeah.
so
That's great advice. Yeah.
That is great
Absolutely.
advice. Keep
it's just
yourself
not, yeah,
varietal.
yeah, it's just not in your control.
Yeah.
I was wondering. I told Marty I would ask about this because I must ask about it.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy being involved with the royalty in the UK?
Oh, of course. That's right. I was wondering where you were going with that. So
No.
Tarik
Oh, I
was
mean, that could have gone anywhere, but
handful of British composers who was asked to write a piece for the coronation for King Charles's
That's right.
coronation.
There were
Skipping
five
ahead a
of
little bit
us.
in your career here.
yeah, sorry, we
We're-
just catapulted somewhere
Yeah.
else, like
When
to
I was
last
11. Um, yeah, there were five of us who wrote for the service, and um, it was the actual event. Yeah, it was well, being there. Yeah, it was amazing.
Like,
Well, for
yeah, I
one
bet.
thing, you're never going to get those performers together again. You
Right.
had like Monteverdi Choir, you had like the choir from the Royal, you had the orchestra from the Royal Opera House, you had this amazing gospel choir there, you had the singers from Westminster Abbey, from the Chapels
Mm.
Royal, you had Bryn Terfel. I mean, you had Pretty Yende, you had like
A
as
list
well as
beyond, A
yeah,
list
yeah,
plus,
everyone's there, and they're
A
like doing
plus
your thing.
list.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, just musically, you're never going to get it. And then, like you can be as cynical as you want about these sort of mega events, but and on the day you have to clear security,
Yeah.
you have to get there very early, and then you're kind of like you're in like the safe zone in your seat. I was in the choir, with all the politicians. I was sat next to who is now the Prime Minister,
Oh my
Keir Starmer.
God.
He was leader of the opposition then.
Stop.
The
That's
British,
wild.
and he was. Well, what happens is you're stuck there for like 2 hours before anything happens. So within the first 5 minutes, like, oh my God, it's like all these politicians. I can ask them all these things, and then like an hour in, you're like, yeah. Do you like coffee? How do you like your coffee? Milk? Oh, that's
Did
great.
you meet King Charles III?
Yes, yes, on a couple of occasions. Um, um,
Sorry.
No, this is,
uh,
I mean, this is such a
So
unique
um,
thing that only
I told
five living
Marty,
composers can talk about. So
yeah, I'm
let's talk
just
about it.
beyond curious about the royal
yeah,
family. Not that this is turning to a royal family podcast. I just need to know what that was like from a composer's perspective. I mean, did he say anything to you about your music?
yeah, he is very knowledgeable about music and the arts, and
Shout out
um,
King
you
Charles.
can definitely see a change from the Queen, his mother, who I think was a supporter of the arts, but I didn't particularly get involved. He was very aware of the music that he wanted for the coronation, and it
Wow, that's cool.
comes from specific moments in his life. And for me, it was we'd met at Lincoln Cathedral in 2007. I'd written a piece of music for the unveiling of this medieval window. This was when he was Prince of Wales, was very interested in architecture. And I remember meeting him then and being surprised at his commentary on the music that I'd just written, that he clearly could have only heard once because it was the premiere. And
Mm.
what he was saying was it had all this antiphonal stuff in it, and he was talking about, the antiphonal effects in the music, and I was like, oh, you actually know what you're talking about.
Right.
And it obviously stuck in his head because that was the piece that he wanted. He wanted the composer of that piece um for the coronation. And so yeah, we met. So I met there, and then we met. There was immediately after the coronation, or the next day, there was an event at Windsor Castle. Is that right? Yes. And we met there. Just what a great way to showcase music to the world and its power.
Yeah, right.
To have commissioned all this new music, made a big deal about it.
Right.
And not just rely on Handel. I mean, there's so much good music that's been written for the coronations of the year over the years. Just not to rely on all that stuff,
Right.
and just be like, this is, probably one of the most watched concerts ever.
Yeah.
Let's make it full of new music from all over um the UK and the Commonwealth. And I think that was really smart. And that
Yeah.
definitely came from the king and his group of advisors.
I just have one more question about the coronation, just because of you were talking.
Settle down, Jackie. One more, okay? One more.
No. It's about his music. So were you? And I guess this could, Marty. This is like a branch out question. So is for this event, and I guess for other events too, where you are commissioned. So as a composer, when you receive a commission, and specifically for the coronation.
Yeah.
Are you told what sort of sound profile the piece needs to have, the mood, the basis of it, or are they just like, what to do?
Normally, what happens is, as you progress through your career as a composer, the restrictions are lifted. So to begin with, you're being basically hired as you might hire a contractor, an architect, or someone to refit your kitchen. You've got very good idea what you want as the commissioner. Duration, forces. You also have a sense of style. You might, even if it's sung, have a text, or you might even have a theme.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell that composer all of that stuff. And what happens is, if you do that piece all right, word of mouth, you'll then get another commission. And slowly what happens is, you've got the product and name recognition, and it starts here. like what you're delivering is good, but no one really knows who you are.
Yeah.
And word of mouth begins to change, and your
Mm.
name starts getting known and known. Then it reaches this sort of equilibrium point where
Mm. Yeah.
you're sort of wanted as you and as the piece. And at that point, you notice like the sort of the restrictions begin to come away, and it's more like, well, okay, we just want a piece for our concert program. It's we're trying to put an orchestral piece. It's like a 15-minute slot. And
Great.
then as your name gets higher than the product, eventually it's like, we'd love you to write something.
Yeah.
And so
We have
that's how that
$20,000. What are you
Yeah.
interested in doing? Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
That's how that works over
Yeah.
time. And remember, fashion can push you down here. You know,
Right. As we've said.
Push you back down there, you mean.
generally
Yeah.
over time, you're going to be going like to this point.
Right.
I don't imagine people go to like someone like Missy Mazzoli at this point, you know, who's doing fabulous work, and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, can you set this poem I've written for
Yeah.
5
Right.
tubas?"
For 5
you know,
tubas and
I think if you want Missy, you're like, we've got an orchestra. We'd love for you to do something that interests you with our orchestra,
Exactly.
and
Right.
we'll make it happen. So there's that.
Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about well, the fact that you're enormously successful in that you've had really high level performances and great recordings in all of these different areas. So you've got the Phoenix
Thank you.
Opera, Matahari, the ballet, chamber works, choir works, symphonic works. I mean, you've sort of hit the nail on the head in all of these different areas. And I wonder, both sort of from a craft standpoint, in terms of how you approach composition itself, how you approach the process in each of those different mediums, but then maybe also just sort of the business of that, and how you've sort of gotten your paws into that many honeypots.
Just a bear.
You're just a bear's gonna bear is the answer to that.
Bear's
question.
gonna bear. It's my
Bear's gonna
t-shirt
bear.
underneath here. Probably means something else in different communities.
There's that. Tarik the bear. Well, we found something to cut.
Why cut it, Marty?
I mean, it's weird because you learn, I'd say you do learn, there are some things you learn from. So I learned a lot about, like, let's say, contracts. So I learned a lot about commissioning contracts from starting off in the choral world. And that you can apply more or less to anything that isn't a grand right. So grand rights, for people that don't know, is anything that's musico-dramatic. So that could be a ballet or an opera, music theatre. And that so commissioning agreements, other than for that, basically tend to be standard. You know, we're going to pay this amount of money to write this piece of music to deliver by this date, and we will slowly cut off your limbs one by one if you deliver it late. And there'll be various exclusivities that might be put in, like we don't want anyone else to perform the piece for a period of time. We want the first option to record the piece. Those things. So there are things like that I think are translatable.
Yeah.
But then, so you're accumulating that knowledge, and that doesn't matter where you start. You could be in whatever sector, but then you will enter a world that you literally know nothing about, and you have to start again. Dance and ballet is one.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about your ballet.
It's beautiful.
Well, as you can tell from my prime physique, I do a lot of dance.
You definitely.
Tarik also did all the choreography.
I was going to say,
the choreography.
You taught.
And understudied one night for Matahari, right? When she was sick, you popped in. You popped right in.
I mean, this echoes what I was saying about getting into the choral world without knowing what I'm doing. Ignorance, by the way, I think is one of the great freeing factors of creativity.
No.
The more that you know about something, the more stressful it is, honestly. So I'll go, I start working in ballet because I noticed that choreographers are using existing works.
Mm.
And Ted Branson, a choreographer at Dutch National Ballet, had used Rye for something. And then we got in touch. He's like, yeah, we're thinking of doing a new ballet. I really like your stuff. We get on well. So it starts from that. And I'm like, yes. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, how do you do that again?
How do you do it? Yeah.
How do you write? How do you write for dance when the choreography isn't done because the choreography's at the end,
Right.
but you've got to write the music for the choreographer to choreograph to, but the choreographer is also kind of like the director. So it's like
Mm.
it's this sort of weird thing.
Yeah, you're
And
looping around,
yeah,
catching up to each other every step of the way. Yeah.
so like going into that world, which I knew nothing about, you learn really quickly how just practically this stuff happens. And you discover that ballets or new dance works, if there's a story, they have a librettist.
Yeah.
There's no singing,
Mm.
but the libretto serves the same
There's
job.
a
It
story.
creates
Yeah.
this kind of narrative,
Right.
and you're both working to this document. So there are things like that that I think you accumulate knowledge in these different fields. And I think that is what I would call, I suppose, like the business side of composing that we as an industry probably do a really, really, really bad job of
Mm.
explaining to people, whether that's at school,
Mhm.
graduate, like I kind of learned on the job. And then, I mean, I got signed to a publisher pretty early, which is Novello in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
which is part of G Sherma out here, part of a company which is now
Mhm.
called Wise Music. But you learn, you learn a lot from your publisher because they're often acting not only as your agent and your promoter, but they're also doing all the sort of legalistic stuff in the background.
Wow.
Um, but if it weren't for that and just looking through and having someone to like this classic thing, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old
Yeah.
and just go down this contract with me. You only need to do it once,
Yeah.
but
Right.
please can you go through this 30-page contract with me like I'm 5, just so I understand it. Unless you've got someone doing that, you don't contracts are there because you don't really understand how the world works. And basically every clause in a contract is because that bad thing happened,
Exactly.
Of
right?
course, yeah.
And so every time you see something totally insane, like a standard commissioning contract is like, what happens if you die halfway through writing the piece?
Yeah.
That's probably happened. That's why that's in there,
That's right.
right?
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
Someone paid a lot of money for a composer to write a piece of music. They probably did 90% of it, and then they died. Who owns that music? Where does it go? Who gets to perform it? What are the rights? Blood, that happened.
Yeah.
And so, that's an extreme case. But there's also just very, very basic things like what happens
Yeah.
if you miss a delivery date?
Right. Yeah.
Do they have a right to pull the piece? What happens if the commissioner cancels it? Do you still get paid? Do you not still get paid? So there are all kinds of things that have happened that really should be kind of up there with the way that we educate composers. And
Mhm.
if you ever wanted to do another strand of podcast, I would do like kind of like 101, like 101 contracting for composers, just 101 business, starting with your basic commissioning agreement and just
Well, isn't
this
it
is how
amazing
this
that
is how we
like
do it.
So niche.
even if you get a PhD in composition, there's none of that.
No, of course. I
Not
mean,
one person ever tried to teach me anything about a contract or how to write it.
that's like a job. I feel
Figure
like
all
that's
of
a
that stuff
job
out yourself.
learned experience.
Yeah.
Learning as you fuck up.
Yeah, the problem with publishing contracts, and we're very used to this in the pop and rock world. We all know examples of bands that have tried to get out of their contract.
Right.
We know famous bands from like the Beatles, Michael Jackson, whoever, George Michael, all these people.
Right.
Or what's been happening with Taylor Swift doing very, very smartly re-recording her own compositions.
Right.
Kesha
Those
as
have
well.
a music contract is a music contract. Doesn't matter if you're a hip hop artist or you're writing symphonic music.
Yeah.
It is about the exploitation of your intellectual property.
Right.
That's it. Right. We're so used to, the average person probably has a better understanding of a band or pop singer fight with their record company than a composer understands their own contract in the classical music world.
Yeah.
The average person can say, well, yeah, they were signed to a 5-album deal and they only recorded 1 album and now they're suing each, already that's like a million times more information than, the average composer knows about their own stuff. And so we are used to it out there. And it is still surprising to me that it's just not a basic part of every composition degree.
I know. It's insane.
Well, Tarik O'Regan.
You can choose. But
Tell me. No. Tell me the right way, or give me a clue.
Okay, go which one? Tell me which one you're gonna do.
Well, okay. I think. Well, no. Now I'm fucking up. I heard you say O'Regan earlier.
Bingo.
Tarik O'Regan. Maybe you can be the first person to teach that kind of class.
I would happily do it. I mean, I think
Montclair State, I mean, any other school.
You could probably do it online. I mean, it's just like
make your own. Actually, no, fuck higher education. Actually, no, cut that. But any other avenue but public or private university, whatever. Make your own course. That'd be awesome. I'll help you.
Well, I think why I think why it's useful is people don't realize, we've spoken about this, Martin. I mean, people don't realize you can make a living in this business, which I find very odd.
Yeah. It feels like it should not be possible, but it is.
You have to be savvy.
You do have to be savvy.
That's the point of this podcast, though.
Yeah.
That's literally the point, is to show people you can.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's like the average person going for any job, right? You get your contract, you read through it, you may query some things or haggle, or like maybe you have some semblance like of what your salary is, what your holiday pay is, what your benefits are.
Yeah.
And you have a discussion about it with the person hiring you. And I feel like all of that stuff that's just like normal for people in employment, when it comes to what we do, is like, oh yeah, I don't know any of it. I was like, imagine you're going for I mean, if you translated that for like someone's going for a job, and like you're
like, pay me whatever, I'll be here Monday.
They give you a contract.
It doesn't happen.
And you look
it literally doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like, I don't quite get it. I think it's possibly that there's still this phobia about money or something, like it's a dirty word. I don't know if that's right, but
I think it's more the perception that people aren't going to take writing music as seriously as full-time employment at a company. That even, people coming up, like younger composers or whatever, people coming up or starting it new, don't feel that they have that same sort of command because it's music.
I think
of course that's wrong.
I think there's no benchmarking. Like, you go for a job, you roughly know what the salary band is going to be, right? Yeah. You know what people in that like, that we have no transparency in the composing world. often the
Oh,
disclosure of your
that's true.
fee,
That's right. That's right.
often the disclosure of your fee breaks the
Yeah.
term of your contract.
So, why don't you tell us some of the commission fees that you've gotten on some of your?
Well, no, I mean, I could
No,
tell
no,
you
no.
the
I'm
way.
completely
I'm
kidding. I'm
happy to
completely
because I think people should know. I think
Ballpark.
you can. So the I could tell you that some of the biggest commissions I've had in terms of exposure have had some of the lowest fees. So like
kidding.
the BBC,
Mm.
the BBC is a wonderful commissioner and they give you a lot of exposure. They're sort of, I would say, notorious for somewhat underpaying. So I think my piece for the proms was like $5,000,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
It's $5,000. But then you go and work, if you go and work in a big opera house, you will be looking, if it's a big opera house and you have a name, you will be looking at six figures.
yeah.
You will, it is in the hundreds of thousands. So there is a huge range.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can also, if you don't understand how your income works, you can make deals whereby, some people, some really big names in opera, they don't want the grand rights. So the grand rights is called royalty income. It's a cut of every ticket. Remember, we were
Right.
talking about ballets. It's a cut of every ticket.
Yeah.
Some composers don't want that, like big names. Like they
Yeah.
just want a
They just want
fee
the
for the
fee up
opera.
front.
And they might be like, I just want this big fat fee. I want like $250,000. And like I don't care what big name. Other composers might take a substantially lower fee, but say, I want 15% of box office.
Yeah.
Now, if you write something that comes back and
And
back
back
and
and back,
back,
then you're in a
that's
way
a
better shape.
very
Yeah.
smart decision to make.
Hmm.
So a lot of people, the dance world is more used to that, where the commission fee is lower than an
Yeah.
opera. But Marty, look, I am happy to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. I mean, I firmly believe we need to be more transparent with how we're paid and where the
Mm.
money is and how it works. Because I
Mm.
think I think I think people make up things in both directions. Like you've got the idea that no one's paid anything.
Yeah, right. Which is
Right. And then
certainly not
you
true.
hear something like, well, this composer bought a whole country from their Christmas Carol, and you're like, that's literally not possible, right?
Right.
That's insane, actually. That's
And
crazy.
so people just start saying this shit all the time. You're like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah.
well, you know that 4-minute choral piece, yeah, he's now or she is queen of a nation that she purchased
Stop.
from the royalties
Ew.
of that piece. And you're
Very
like,
weird.
Ugh.
So yes, there is massive income range.
Yeah.
And if you're one of the ways that I would say a good sort of practical tip for composers, if you want to make like regular income, is to try and you're going to have different types of income. One of the main differences is between sale items and hire items. Smaller
Right.
pieces are sold, so you
Yep.
make the money once, right?
Hmm.
Choral pieces,
Yeah.
you're going to choir might buy 50 copies of something, but they then don't want to pay for it, right? They want to be able to perform it whenever they do.
Right.
Orchestral pieces tend to be hired, so every time that piece is done, there's a hire fee that comes into you.
Mm.
If you can write either, again, going back to this, like have a portfolio,
Yeah, exactly.
write a range of pieces that have different income streams, or you can combine them, into piece for chorus and orchestra. That's another way that means that there is, regular income coming in. But I mean, I feel like this would be almost its own.
Absolutely.
It would be its own. I mean, we could talk about this and really get into the weeds on it. But all to
Yeah.
say, top level, very broad range of income, very different ways of making that income.
Yeah.
And whatever you hear, the gossip at either end is likely not true.
Right. The truth's always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you so
that was
much for spending some
awesome.
time with us.
Thank you. Yeah. So
I
I'm
always
gonna.
felt just so fortunate that I got to study
Oh,
with you and got to know you, and you really changed the way that I wrote. You taught me how to like really cut and edit and kill my
oh
babies.
yes.
And
That's right.
that really was the turning point for me in my own
Marty,
writing, was that time with you. And I
Marty,
know, of course, I was always your favorite student. That was always
you're
very
my favorite
obvious.
student,
Well,
obviously.
and I will say this, I can attest to your fantastic teaching because I love playing Marty's music, and now
Oh,
I'm gonna look into yours.
you really
So
do.
hope you
Very
have some
beautiful.
flute wind stuff
somewhere,
Of course.
somewhere in there.
somewhere. So I'm gonna check
Yeah,
that
yeah,
out for myself. That's awesome.
All right.
Super exciting.
Do you remember, Marty? You were incredibly one of the most fluent composers I've ever worked with.
Oh
But
gosh.
I would just draw lines. I
Oh.
would just draw lines through pages.
No, it's true.
Do you remember?
For a reason,
And
I
I'd
do
go,
write
"This is
fast. I
extraneous.
do write
This is
fast.
extraneous."
Extraneous. That's right. That
That's
was our
right.
motto.
Wow.
Extraneous. Extraneous.
I was always amazed. Like I'd turn up and like he's like, "Yeah, I've just written this." I was like, "How do you do this?" I was nowhere near sophisticated.
But you got me to just be really real with myself. That like, okay, great. I wrote this, half this cantata this week. But like, well, but this part is actually extraneous. You don't need it. And if you chop this out and connect these two pieces, you've got a really great bit of music.
That was fun. Yeah. That was nice. Well,
And good old Tear Bear, he was the one to teach me to do that.
That's really good. You got to keep that.
I feel that now that we're 3,000 miles apart, I can safely call you that. You're not gonna do that.
Tear Bear.
Tear Bear.
All right.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you.
It was a really an honor to
Great
talk to you again.
meet you. Yes.
Great to meet you too.
Wonderful.
Let me know when this all goes out.
I
will.
I will. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So great to
Oh,
see
wow.
him again. He's just such a big brother figure to me.
Of course. And it's interesting because he was your teacher, but you're not super far apart in age.
That's true. Yeah, he's like 7 years older than me. Just like Alex.
Like,
similar
and-
kind of
Yeah.
like
and
musical
us.
big brother kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was fantastic. That's someone.
Yeah, a lot of really great insight.
Yes, that's someone who I feel like is well, he's obviously has a lot of notoriety and people know who he is, but more people need to know who he is.
For sure.
So I'm really glad we interviewed him, and this is great. Like, I'm making all these new friends, Marty.
See? We're broadening our horizons. Never stop learning. Never stop being curious.
No, forever.
That's also a recurring theme that we're seeing from our
it's cliche, but like I love calling myself a lifelong learner because I genuinely believe it, and I think that everyone should embody that.
I think you're done. I think you're done.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're brilliant. You're amazing.
Let me just. But yeah, that was great.
That was a lot of fun.
Loved it.
I
Fantastic.
love talking about this stuff and talking with these great
I
people.
know.
I hope
And
that our
you learn-
listeners are enjoying it as well. And
Me too, because you learn so much. I mean, it is, of course, about working in the music industry, but I think there's so many life lessons
we
to be
keep
had.
kind of talking about the youngins, but I do want folks who are listening to know that it is also important to me too for like people who are already in a profession.
Yes,
to just catch that glimpse into what the rest of us are sort of up to, and
absolutely
for the opera director to find out what the film composer's up to, and all of that. So,
and I think that transferable knowledge.
there's
I mean,
so
even
much
if
transferable knowledge.
you work on Wall Street and you're finding yourself listening to our podcast because you're someone who enjoys music.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
this is more insight for you, and maybe it's time for you to leave Wall Street and start your guitar journey, Wall Street man or woman or person.
Oh, yeah. Join us.
That's great.
Come to the dark side.
Come on, play the music, write the music.
You want to just be a musician.
Do it. Awesome.
On that creepy note,
Creepy.
shall we bid adieu?
Yeah, bid adieu. This was really fun. Loved
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Bye,
Ta-ta, and we'll see you at the next one.
See you at the next one.
Bye-bye.
So, can I ask Tarik my question? So, please state your name and what is your job in music?
Oh, I am Tarik O'Regan and I write music.
Brilliant.
Marty, we're ending every episode with that, by the way.
I like it.
I like the name State. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. It's just my own creative thought. It's like a little.
It's
like
very just, it's the great I am.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. I love that.